Did you know 80% of all sudden cardiac arrests happen at home? About 60% are witnessed. Performing immediate CPR can double a person's chance of survival. Don't stress.
Okay, we're going to pause before we talk about this next part. Now, the end of that part of the video kind of got confusing. They started talking about some stuff that you may or may not have heard before. This next section, that'll kind of clarify a lot of that stuff. But the first thing that they talked about, and the first thing that we're going to practice, which is also the first part of CPR that you perform, is compressions. Compressions are the most important part of CPR. So when you're doing your compressions, you really want to make sure that you're doing them correctly. One thing, when you're doing your CPR, you always want to make sure that you have that person on a firm, flat surface. So if you find someone in the bed, you want to get that person down to the ground. Because if I'm doing my compressions on this person's on a mattress, they're just going to be bouncing up and down with the mattress. It's going to be pointless. Unless it's some type of mattress that deflates so that you can perform CPR on them, or you have a board on them, under them, something like that. So when you're doing your compressions, again, you want to have that person on a firm, flat surface. Another thing that the video talked about, a lot of people worry about when we talk about doing compressions is breaking ribs. That's usually everybody's biggest concern with doing compressions. And honestly, that's something that happens a lot. Like they said, if you think you broke some ribs, you want to keep going. You want to make sure that you have your hands in the right place, but you want to keep going. They say in about 30% of cases, if you were to do an x-ray on someone after they've had CPR performed on them, they'll have some type of chest or some type of rib injury. So a lot of times, even if you're doing everything correctly, and you're pushing at least 2 inches deep into that person's chest, you're going to feel some cracking. It's going to feel disgusting when you're doing them. You just want to keep going. You're trying to save that person. But again, we want to make sure we have our hands in the right place. So that's the first thing that we want to practice. So we'll have everybody standing up with the mannequin in front of you. Alright, so have everybody standing in front of your mannequin. And of course, in a real situation, you'd be on the ground, but for practice, we use the tables. If anybody does want to do them on the ground, you prefer doing that, let me know. We have some mats, you can do that also. Okay? So you want to start out with your hands right in the center of the chest. Like the video said, right across from the armpit. Another thing that you can do, you can place 2 fingers right at the lower tip of the sternum. And that's right before that sternum ends, so not after it becomes soft, but right before. You put the heel of your other hand right in the center of the chest. So start out with those 2 fingers again. Okay? Then put that hand next to those 2 fingers instead of on top. On the side of them. So just like this. No? Start, keep those fingers down. No? Start with those fingers again. And then just put that hand next to them like that. Yep, there you go. Okay. Alright, then after that, you're going to take that other hand, put that one on top of that one, and you want your shoulders directly over your hands also. Oh, you need another mannequin. I'm sorry. I didn't even notice that. There you go. Okay. So another thing, when you're doing those compressions, you want to make sure that you have your shoulders directly over your hands. You don't want to be back here doing your compressions like this. You want to be leaning forward. So you got your shoulders directly over your hands so that when you're doing your compressions, you're coming straight down with those compressions. Okay? Another thing you want to make sure that you're doing is, or not doing, is bending your arms and using your arms to do your compressions. When you're doing your compressions, you're just using your body weight. All you're doing is putting that weight on your hands and taking it off, just like that. On your hands and taking it off. So you want to keep those elbows locked so that you're only using your body weight. That'll save a lot of energy, and it'll be a lot easier to do those compressions. So let's do a few practice compressions. Let's do it again. No, that's good. You can hear that plastic cut. All right. Yep. Okay. And yeah, if you're using one of these little anti-mannequins, you should hear that little click. If you're using one of these other mannequins, the CPR Brad mannequins, you won't hear a click. check everybody out over here. I'm going to scoot your hands up about right there. Right about where that hyphen is at. Okay. Okay. All right, that's good, that's good. Now, we just want to work on the rate that we do those compressions at. You always want to remember that the rate that you're doing your compressions at is a rate of about 100 per minute. Okay? And that's important to remember. And again, that's 100 per minute. What that means is that your 30 compressions should take you 18 seconds to do. And it's at least 100 per minute. So if it's a little faster, that's not that bad. Just make sure you let that chest come all the way back up before you push down. You just don't want to be slower. So it should take you exactly 18 seconds to do those. And again, that's fast, but it's not super fast. A lot of times it helps if you're counting while you're doing your compressions. If you were to count 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5, 6, 7, all the way up to 30, you pretty much always get them done in 18 seconds. Okay? So let's practice. Right now we'll count out loud, doing our 30 compressions. We'll have everyone do them together, and we'll see how that goes. So we'll start with our hands in the center of the chest. And actually we're going to time them. And I'll tell everybody when to start. And hopefully we finish together also. Alright. Ready? And go. Let's speed those up. Okay, now that was just a little bit over 18 seconds. Wasn't bad, but we want to just try to speed it up just a little bit. That was a pretty good rate. Now there was also a study that I read that talked about the rate that you do those compressions at. The American Heart Association did a study with 2 groups of healthcare professionals. They had one group, they did their compressions just like y'all were just doing, just 1 and 2 and 3 counting out loud. They had another group that did their compressions along with music, along with the Bee Gees song, Staying Alive. Because that song's exactly 100 beats per minute, the same rate that you should be doing your compressions if you're doing them correctly. A few weeks later, they brought the 2 groups back together, and the group that did their compressions along with the music was a lot better at doing their compressions at the correct rate than the other group. So in my classes, we do the same thing. We do them along with the music because we want to be like the second group and not like the first group. So what we're going to do right now, we're going to start with our hands in the center of the chest. We're going to do our 30 compressions along with that. We're going to time it, make sure we get them done in that 18 seconds. And that might even help us to kind of stay together a little bit. So I'll tell everybody when to start. So we'll start with our hands in the center of the chest. Ready? And go. Y'all do exactly 30 or y'all do over 30? Okay, all right. So everybody was pretty much together that time, so that was a lot even better. And as you can see, as long as you go at that tempo, you'll be good. That's the tempo you always want to go at. You can see it's not super fast, it's not as fast as you possibly can go, but at the same time, it's not slow. And if it's too slow, it's not going to be effective. Okay? All right, you can have a seat. Okay, next thing that we're going to do is what you would do after you do your compressions, and that's rescue breathing. And again, because that person's not breathing on their own, that tells you that you need to do rescue breathing. If this person were breathing fine when you did your check for breathing, then there would be no need to breathe for that person. Also, when you check for breathing, if you notice that that person's not normally breathing, but they're just kind of gasping, they're just kind of like, something like that, you still want to give them 2 breaths, okay? You don't want to confuse that gasping for